She was sitting on my porch steps with a duffel bag between her knees, and a look on her face like she'd already been told no by everyone else. She was maybe 7, maybe 8, small for whatever age she was, wearing a jacket that was too light for the weather, and sneakers with the Velcro tab half torn off. She looked up at me when I opened the door and said in a voice that was steadier than it had any right to be, "My mom said you'd know what to do." I didn't know who this child was. I didn't know who had dropped her here. And then my sister Ranata stepped out from behind the oak tree at the edge of my driveway, thinner than I'd seen her in years, and said, "Marcus, I need you to take her. I can't do it anymore." I hadn't spoken to Ranata in 4 years. I hadn't known she had a daughter at all. I had no idea my sister even had a daughter, until she showed up demanding I raise the girl, and my wife had something to say about it. My name is Marcus Delwood. I'm 43 years old, and I work as a site supervisor for a commercial construction company. The kind of job where you spend your days managing people, logistics, and problems that change shape every hour, and where the skill that keeps everything running is staying calm when the situation is telling you to be anything but. I've been doing this work for 15 years. I'm good at the calm part professionally. Personally, it's something I've had to work at a lot harder. I've been married to my wife Petra for 9 years. She's a pediatric occupational therapist, which means she spends her days with children who need patient, skilled attention. And she brings that same quality home, not in an exhausting clinical way, but in the way of someone who has genuinely thought about how people work, what they need, and what costs something to give. We have 2 kids of our own, our son Darius, who's 11, and our daughter Imani, who just turned 8. The 4 of us live in a house we've been slowly fixing up since we bought it 6 years ago, and our life has the particular shape of something built deliberately. Not perfect, not without stress, but solid in a way that both of us have put real work into. My sister Ranata is 4 years younger than me, and the distance between us wasn't always as wide as it became. We were close growing up, the way siblings who have survived a difficult household often are, bonded by the specific understanding that comes from having lived through the same storms together and made different choices about how to carry the aftermath. Our mother had her own struggles. Our father was largely absent, and we became each other's primary consistent presence for most of our childhoods. Then Renata's 20s happened. The version I'll give you is the honest one. She got into patterns with substances that were at first recreational and then weren't. And she got into relationships that were at first complicated and then dangerous. And no matter how many times I tried to pull her back towards something stable, she found her way back to the patterns. I spent the better part of a decade trying to be her lifeline, and I watched it cost my marriage in its early years. Petra was patient, genuinely patient, but she was also direct about the toll it was taking on our household, and on me specifically. The last serious episode, 4 years before that morning on the porch, had involved Ranata taking money from us, not a small amount, during a period when she'd convinced me she was in a stable program and trying to get back on her feet. She wasn't. The money was gone. The program was half real, and I made the hardest decision I'd made up to that point, which was to stop. Petra had asked me, carefully and without ultimatum, whether I understood that I couldn't want Ranata's recovery more than Ranata wanted it. I did understand it. It took me a long time to apply it. So when I opened my front door that morning and saw a child I didn't know sitting on my porch steps, and then saw my sister emerge from behind the oak tree in the yard, thinner than I'd seen her, eyes that had the particular hollowed quality of someone who hasn't been sleeping or eating right, the first thing I felt wasn't love or anger or shock. It was a kind of heavy recognition, like a door I'd thought I'd locked had been left ajar the whole time. I looked at Ranata. "Come inside," I said. "Both of you." The girl's name was Cora. She was 8 years old, born during a period when Ranata and I had no contact, which explained everything and nothing at the same time. The father, Ranata told me at the kitchen table while Cora sat in the living room watching Darius play a video game with the focused attention of a child trying to map a new environment, was a man named Theo, who had been out of the picture since Cora was 2. Ranata had been raising her. Loosely, she admitted. The word she used was loosely. For the past several years across a series of different situations, different cities, different people who came and went. "I need her to be somewhere safe," Ranata said. "I'm not safe right now." "Define not safe," I said. She looked at the table. "I owe people money. The kind of people where owing them money has consequences. I need to get out of the situation, and I can't do that with a kid. I just need some time." Petra had been standing in the kitchen doorway since we came inside. I knew her face well enough to read it. She was listening. She was taking in everything, and she had not yet decided what she thought, which, with Petra, means she's being careful because the stakes are real. I told Ranata she could stay for dinner and we'd talk more, after Cora was settled somewhere. I needed time to think, and I needed to talk to my wife. Petra and I had the conversation in our bedroom that night after both households of children were asleep. I sat on the edge of the bed and she stood near the window, and neither of us started for a moment. She said, "Tell me what you're thinking." "I'm thinking Cora didn't choose any of this," I said. "She's 8 years old, and she's been dragged through whatever Ranata's life has been for the last several years. And she sat on my porch steps with a half-broken Velcro sneaker and didn't cry once." "I noticed that too," Petra said. "I'm also thinking," I said, "that I know how Ranata operates. I know what 'I just need some time' has meant in the past. And I know I can't make this decision without you." Petra was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "I want to be honest with you about something." "Go ahead." "My first reaction when I saw them in the driveway, before I let myself think it through, was no. Just no. Immediate and instinctive." She looked at me steadily. "I'm not proud of that. But I'm telling you because you need to know it's there, and we need to talk through it rather than around it." I appreciated that more than I knew how to say right then. "What's the thought-through version?" "The thought-through version is that there is a little girl asleep in our guest room who is not responsible for her mother's choices and who needs something stable. And we are people who can provide something stable." She paused. "The also true version is that this will change our lives, and Darius and Imani's lives. and we have to be honest about what we're agreeing to before we agree to it. Ranata is going to say it's temporary, I said. Yes, Petra said, and we need to decide whether we're entering this as a temporary situation or whether we're entering it as potentially permanent with an uncertain timeline, because those are two different things to say yes to. That conversation lasted 2 hours. We didn't resolve everything that night, but by the end of it, we had agreed on one thing. Cora was not going back into whatever Ranata was returning to. Whatever we decided about the longer shape of it, that part was settled. The next morning, I sat down with Ranata alone and asked her the question I'd been building toward since I saw her in the driveway. "How long have you been keeping Cora from me?" I said. She looked at her hands. "I didn't keep her from you. Ranata, I didn't know she existed." "You weren't talking to me," she said. "You cut me off." "I cut off contact after you stole from us. I didn't cut off the possibility of telling me you had a child." She was quiet. "Did you think I wouldn't want to know?" I said. "Or did you know that telling me meant letting me see how things actually were?" She didn't answer for a long time. Then she said, "Both, probably." That was the most honest thing she'd said to me in years, and it was also the hardest thing to hear, because it confirmed what I'd suspected, that keeping Cora a secret wasn't purely about the estrangement. It was about not wanting anyone who knew her before to see what her life had become. The secret had been a kind of protection for Ranata's self-image, and Cora had been living inside that protection with no say in the matter. I looked at my sister across the table, and I understood something I'd been slow to understand for most of my adult life. That I had spent years trying to save Ranata from situations she was also, in quiet ways, choosing. Not because she was a bad person, but because the life she'd built around her patterns had become familiar in the way that painful things can become familiar. And familiar feels safer than uncertain, even when it's demonstrably worse. I couldn't fix that for her. I never could. What I could do was make sure that the child caught in the middle of it had somewhere else to land. Ranata left 2 days later. She hugged Cora for a long time in the driveway, told her she loved her and that she was going to get things right. And then she got into the car with a man I didn't recognize who'd come to pick her up. Cora watched the car go. She didn't cry in the driveway. She waited until she was inside, sitting on the couch with her knees pulled up, and then she cried quietly for about 20 minutes while Petra sat next to her without saying anything, just present, the way Petra is present when someone needs witness more than solution. All of this was happening during one of the more pressured stretches at work I'd had in a long time. We were in the final phase of a large commercial build, a medical office complex that had already run 12 weeks behind schedule due to subcontractor problems the previous winter. And I was managing a crew of 22 people while dealing with an owner's rep who called me twice a day with questions I had already answered in writing. I was leaving the house at 6 in the morning and getting home at 6:30 at best, and trying to be fully present for a family that had just doubled in emotional complexity overnight. There were 2 weeks where I was running on 5 hours of sleep, and I remember one evening in the truck after a site walkthrough thinking, something is going to give, and I need to make sure it's not the thing that matters most. I handed off 2 secondary project responsibilities to my assistant supervisor, a capable woman named Felice, who had been ready for more responsibility anyway. The project came in 6 days late instead of 12. That was the right call. Darius was confused at first. He came to me a few days after Cora arrived and asked, with the directness 11-year-olds are still capable of before they learn to soften things, "Is she staying forever?" I told him I didn't know yet, and that for now we were taking care of her the way you take care of someone who needs it. "What if we don't know for a long time?" he said. I told him that sometimes you do the right thing before you know how it's going to turn out, and that waiting to have all the answers before you act isn't usually how the important decisions work. He considered that seriously. Then he said, "Okay," and went back to his room. 2 weeks later, he was teaching Cora how to play chess on the living room floor, explaining the rules with a patience that honestly surprised me, and letting her take back a move when she made one she clearly didn't understand. Imani, on the other hand, had feelings about a new person occupying space that had previously been partly hers, and she was not subtle about it. There were 2 weeks of small frictions. A toy moved without asking, a seat at the table that felt contested, the particular territorial navigation of children who are trying to work out a new social order. Petra handled it the way she handles everything, directly, with warmth, and without pretending the friction wasn't real. She sat with both girls one evening while I was finishing dinner and had a conversation I could hear pieces of from the kitchen, the gist of which was that caring about someone new doesn't mean you care about the people already here any less, and that making room for someone isn't the same as losing something. Imani came to dinner afterward and passed Cora the rolls without being asked, and something shifted after that. We filed for emergency guardianship 6 weeks after Cora arrived, with the help of a family law attorney Petra found through a colleague. The process was not fast, and it was not simple, and there were several weeks where the outcome was uncertain enough that I couldn't sleep reliably, and Petra and I were both running on a kind of sustained adrenaline that wears on a marriage in ways you don't fully register until it passes. We got through it the way we've gotten through hard things before, by being honest with each other, even when the honest thing was, "I don't know if I can handle this today." And by taking turns being the steady one. Ranata called twice during that period, once to check on Cora, once to ask if there was any way I could send her some money to help with a situation she described vaguely. I told her the answer to the first was that Cora was fine and adjusting, and the answer to the second was no. She didn't argue. She just said, "Okay, Marcus," in a voice that carried something I couldn't fully read, and hung up. I haven't heard from her since, and that's been 8 months now. Cora has been with us for just over a year. She's 9 now, enrolled in the same school as Imani, and she has started to do the thing that kids do when they begin to feel secure. She asks for things. Small things, tentatively, like she's still waiting to find out that asking has a cost. We keep showing her it doesn't, and slowly, incrementally, the asking gets a little easier. She likes to draw, fills entire notebooks with detailed scenes that have their own internal logic, and she has started leaving them on the kitchen table for whoever wants to look, which feels like a kind of trust. Petra told me last spring, on a night when the kids were all asleep and we were sitting on the back porch with the last of the evening light, "I want you to know that I'm glad we did this." "Are you?" I said. I'm tired, she said. And it's harder than I thought it would be. And it's going to keep being hard in ways we haven't encountered yet. And yes, I'm glad. I reached over and held her hand. We sat there until it got dark. I still don't know what Ranata's life looks like right now. I hope she's found something more solid than what she was standing on when she left Cora on my porch. I hope she's getting the kind of help that actually holds. But I stopped a long time ago making my own peace dependent on what Ranata does or doesn't do. That's her work, and it always was. Mine is here, at the kitchen table, in the school pickup line, on the back porch with my wife when the kids are asleep and the night is quiet, and the life we've built is bigger and harder and more real than the one we planned. I'll take it. Has there ever been a moment when something, a person, a responsibility, a situation, landed in your life without warning, and you had to decide in real time what kind of person you were going to be about it? How did that decision change you? Tell me in the comments. If this story moved you at all, please hit the like button. It takes a second, and it genuinely helps this channel reach people who need it. And if you're new here, subscribe. I put out new stories every week. None of them are easy. Every single one of them is worth telling.